Mom had already set out the plates when I came upstairs. Toast over easy eggs and the exact right amount of hot sauce on the side. She used to do that when I was in high school before early welding practice. For a moment, I let myself believe it meant something. "I'll only be gone 2 days," I said, sliding into the chair across from her. "Just a maintenance contract at the mill in Springfield, but I start the new job Monday." She nodded, stirring her coffee slowly. "That's great, honey." It sounded like a reflex more than a response. Her eyes didn't leave the phone beside her even when I smiled. I know it's not a big company like Weston was, but it's solid pay. Full-time benefits. I'll finally be able to pay off the last of what I owe you. Still no eye contact, just a distracted hum. She typed something and tilted the screen away from me. I focused on my eggs. Don't make it weird, I told myself. She let me stay when I needed it. She didn't have to. When I stood to rinse my plate, she looked up finally and said, "Drive safe." "I will," I said. She kissed my cheek a little too quickly and pulled me into a side hug like we were performing for someone who wasn't there. Then she went back to her phone. The morning sun cast long shadows as I walked to the car. My duffel bag clanked from the welding gear. I placed it in the trunk like I was packing a new beginning. And as I pulled out of the driveway, I looked back once and saw the curtains move. Just a sliver. Just enough. I turned onto our street around 6 hours earlier than planned. The job had wrapped up faster than expected, and I was eager to crawl into bed. My hands still smelled like hot steel and burnt rubber familiar grounding. But as I slowed in front of the house, I saw them black garbage bags, dozens lined along the edge of the front lawn. Some torn open, spilling socks, sweaters, notebooks, even my welding gloves into the patchy grass near the gate. My duffel bag sat upright like it had been thrown and landed wrong. My gaming monitor leaned crooked against the mailbox, unwrapped, exposed, and standing just beyond the bags. My mother holding her phone like she was filming a cooking demo. Next to her, Sophie had her arm outstretched, selfie style, giving her followers a full view of the spectacle. I could hear her voice before I even got out of the car. And there she is back from another business trip, still owing $8,000 in rent. Watch closely, folks. This is what entitlement looks like. Ethan paced like a bouncer with nowhere to go. When he saw me approaching, he smirked, walked up to one of the bags, and kicked it hard enough to send my book skidding into the dirt. Finally, he muttered, "The family freeloader is out for good." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My chest felt like someone had flipped a switch and drained all the air. My mom raised her phone and narrated, her voice polished and performative. "Ava Lynn, 29, living in my basement for months like a parasite. No more. This is your eviction notice. Public and permanent." Some neighbors stood frozen on their porches. Mrs. Carter across the street held her dog leash with both hands, expression unreadable. Mr. Hansen filmed from behind a bush. No one moved. No one said anything. I bent down slowly, picking up the hardcover that had slid from the bag. The cover was bent. I straightened it, set it aside, picked up the next item. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just kept loading my car piece by piece while Sophie's voice rang out from behind me, narrating every step like it was her job. I closed the trunk gently and turned around one last time. They were still filming, still grinning. "Enjoy the show," I said quietly. "You'll be hearing from me soon." I had just closed the back door of my car when I heard the porch door slam open. My dad marched down the steps, face red, jaw clenched, and without a word, he flung a set of keys toward me. They hit the side of my face with a dull thud and landed in the gravel. "Take your junk and get out," he barked. "You're not our daughter anymore. Real adults don't mooch off their parents at your age." I blinked, rubbed my cheek where the metal had struck, then leaned down to pick up the keys. I didn't flinch, not in front of him. He stood there, arms crossed, waiting for some dramatic meltdown. Sophie had her camera angled for a better shot. Ethan was pacing again, grinning like this was a game he'd already won. I opened the driver's side door, climbed in, and shut it with deliberate quiet. Before starting the engine, I looked through the window at all three of them. Mom with her rehearsed indifference, Sophie with her manufactured disgust. Ethan with his practiced cruelty. Then I looked at my dad. He didn't break eye contact, but something flickered confusion maybe when I didn't break either. I turned the key, pulled away slowly, and didn't look back. I drove aimlessly for a while. The familiar streets of the neighborhood blurred into each other. At some point, I ended up in the grocery store parking lot, headlights off, engine running, just sitting there with both hands on the wheel. It wasn't until I reached Mia's apartment, her porch light still on, that I remembered the envelope. It had been sitting at the bottom of my filing bin for over a year. Thick paper, no return address, just my name in my grandfather's unmistakable handwriting. He'd given it to me at the hospital a few weeks before he passed. Said, "Don't open it unless things get bad." I never thought I'd need to, but now everything inside me said, "Open it." I set my overnight bag on the floor, pulled the envelope from the side pocket, and laid it across my knees. Mia made tea and set it on the table beside me, then slipped into her room without asking questions. She knew I'd talk when I was ready. I stared at the envelope for a long time before I opened it. The flap came up cleanly, like it had been waiting patiently all this time. Inside was a folded letter, several notarized documents, and a business card from a law firm downtown. The letter was handwritten. "Ava, if you're reading this, it means they've done what I feared. I couldn't protect you from them while I was alive, so I'm doing it now. I've placed part of the house, the lake cabin, and the shop building in your name. It's all legal, all documented. You don't owe them anything. Not apologies, not silence, not guilt. This is for when they forget what you're worth. Grandpa." The room blurred. My fingers trembled not from sadness, but something sharper. Something like clarity. The documents backed it all up, a living trust. My name was listed next to percentages: 40% of the family home, 50% of a lake cabin in Lane County, 35% of the commercial building my dad's business ran out of on Jefferson Street. The business card at the bottom read James Carter Estate and Property Law. The next morning I called. His receptionist hesitated until I mentioned my grandfather's name, then offered me a last-minute slot that afternoon. Mr. Carter's office was in an old stone building near the university mahogany furniture, quiet ticking clock walls lined with legal volumes. He remembered me immediately. "You used to come with him to meetings," he said. "Always brought that little red sketchbook." I nodded. He reviewed the documents, carefully flipping through with the kind of precision only decades of practice could build. When he looked up, his expression was unreadable, but his voice was firm. "It's all valid. The trust was finalized before your grandfather passed. They can't legally remove you, sell without your consent, or claim ignorance. If they've been collecting rent or taking loans against any of these, they may have a bigger problem than they realize." I sat back in the chair, my heart still pounding. "I'm ready to proceed," I said. He leaned forward slightly. "Then let's begin." The first text came that night. Sophie, 8:47 p.m. "Hey, hope you're not mad. The stream wasn't meant to embarrass you. It was just content. You know how the algorithm is." I didn't answer. By morning, there were 12 more messages, 2 missed calls from Mom, a voicemail from Ethan. "You're overreacting. It wasn't even that serious. You know how she gets. Just come back and talk like an adult." I forwarded everything to Mr. Carter. By midday, Dad's number lit up my screen. "Dad, 1:14 p.m. We need you to sign a few things. No drama, just paperwork, no explanation, no apology, just instructions like I was an employee who missed a deadline." Mr. Carter responded on my behalf with a brief formal notice that all future communication should go through his office. He CC'd their family lawyer. I turned off read receipts and let the silence do the work. I spent the next few hours organizing the few things I had salvaged. Mia had cleared a shelf for me, and I stacked my books there, less than half my collection, but enough. I folded the clean clothes, placed the monitor carefully by the desk, and stared at the dent in its frame. Then I picked up a pen. It had been years since I kept a journal, but that night I opened a blank notebook and wrote a single line. They only listened when I stopped explaining. The words came easier after that. Not rage, not revenge, just observations. What I saw in their eyes, what I didn't see in their hearts, what I had mistaken for safety, what I would never unsee again. By the time I closed the journal, my phone was still vibrating every few minutes. Sophie's voice memos. Ethan's passive-aggressive guilt. Dad's insistence. I turned the phone face down and let it buzz into the mattress. They were loud. They had always been loud. But this time, my silence said more than their shouting ever could. Mr. Carter called 2 days later, his voice calm but clipped. "We've finished reviewing the income history on the properties." He said, "Your parents and brother have been collecting rent from the lake cabin and the commercial building. None of it disclosed to you." I closed my eyes. "How much? Just over $50,000. 3 years of tenant payments." "Your share wasn't even acknowledged," he said. Acknowledged like it was a clerical oversight. We both knew better. By the end of the day, certified letters had gone out to the family's legal representative outlining the exact amount owed and my ownership percentages. Mr. Carter had also contacted the banks involved with the business loans tied to the commercial property. If they had approved financing without all stakeholders' signatures, they were at risk too. The silence that followed was different this time. Not stunned, not wounded, calculating. 3 days later, Ethan showed up at my new job. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I had just clocked out for lunch and was heading toward the back parking lot when I saw him leaning against the side of my car, arms folded, phone in hand. I kept walking, didn't stop. "Ava," he said, tone too casual. "You got a minute?" I kept the keys in my grip ready. He stepped into my path. "We need to talk." I looked him straight in the eye. "You're trespassing. Move." He leaned in, voice low and tight. "You're tearing the family apart over some technicality. That money wasn't yours. You want to play this lawyer game, fine, but it won't end the way you think." I didn't flinch. Step away from my car. A couple of coworkers appeared by the exit. One of them called out my name. Ethan turned to look, then stepped back, muttering something under his breath. "I won't say it again," I said, pulling out my phone. "This is harassment. You need to leave." Security met me by the door minutes later. By then, he was already gone. Back inside, I filed an incident report with the front office and sent the footage from the parking lot camera to Mr. Carter. He replied within the hour, noted and logged proceeding as discussed. They had made the first move. Now they would learn what it felt like to play defense. They came on a Thursday evening just after sunset. I heard the knock first sharp and impatient, then the voices, too many of them. I walked to the door without opening it. The security camera feed on my phone confirmed what I already suspected. All 4 of them. My mother clutching a tissue. My father with arms crossed and jaw locked. Ethan leaning against the wall like this was beneath him. And Sophie, standing off to the side, half watching the door and half scrolling her phone. Ava Mom called out, voice cracking. "Please, honey, we just want to talk. This has all gotten out of hand." Dad stepped forward. "Open the door. You're acting like a child." From behind them, Ethan muttered something I couldn't hear. Sophie didn't look up. I didn't answer right away. I wanted them to sit in the discomfort. Let it soak. Dad knocked again, harder this time. "We are your family. You can't just shut us out over paperwork." I spoke clearly, loud enough for the mic to pick up. "All future communication goes through Mr. Carter. You've already been informed of this." There was a pause, like they hadn't expected me to respond at all. Mom's voice came next, thinner now. "You don't have to do this. We can work it out, just the 5 of us. We'll delete the videos. We'll fix it." From the feed, I watched Sophie glance at her phone and tuck it behind her back. She wasn't here for peace. She was here for footage. "I'm not discussing anything without legal representation," I said. "If you remain here, I will contact building security." Dad's face darkened. "So you're hiding now behind lawyers. You told me I wasn't your daughter." "Remember," Ethan looked away. Sophie started typing something. Mom wiped at her eyes, suddenly out of things to say. They stood there for another minute. Then they left slowly without a word. As soon as the hallway cleared, I locked the deadbolt and opened the laptop. Mr. Carter had just emailed me a new file marked Settlement Negotiation Initial Draft. The offer came 2 days later. Their attorney emailed Mr. Carter with a proposal they would transfer full ownership of the lake cabin to me if I agreed to forego any claims on the back rent or future income from the commercial building. Mr. Carter didn't even hesitate. "We reject," he wrote back. And we restate our original terms. The cabin was worth less than a third of what I was owed. They thought I'd take the bait, let them off the hook in exchange for peace and a symbolic hand-me-down. But I wasn't interested in symbolism. I wanted acknowledgement. I met with Mr. Carter the next morning and laid out what mattered to me. A formal payment plan for the unpaid rent, a third-party property management company to handle all future income, and a written admission of financial misrepresentation. "I want it in writing," I said. "And I want it signed." He nodded once. "Then that's what we'll demand." While negotiations crawled, their cracks began to show. Sophie lost over 5,000 followers in a week. Someone from high school had recognized me in her stream and started posting receipts. A few of her sponsors dropped her. She deleted the eviction video, but the internet doesn't forget. Dad's business took a hit too. Turns out one of his clients saw a clip and decided not to move forward with a project. Then a loan application got flagged. When banks started reviewing ownership documents, the trust surfaced. Mom stopped texting. Ethan sent one angry email that Mr. Carter forwarded without comment. Sophie tried calling twice. I didn't answer. When their lawyer finally responded, the tone had changed. Less aggressive, more careful. They agreed to everything: monthly payments, third-party oversight, and a written acknowledgement signed by all four of them. I read the document twice before signing. At the bottom, just above my name, I added a sentence of my own. "Truth isn't betrayal. It's what happens when the performance ends." I sent it back and waited. The final part hadn't happened yet. They still had one more thing to do. The apartment was small, but it was mine. One bedroom, uneven floorboards, and a draft in the kitchen window that whistled when the wind picked up. But the lease was in my name, and the first month's rent came straight from my paycheck at the new welding job. No shared space, no borrowed time, no one filming at the door. 2 days after I moved in, the envelope arrived a check. The first installment of the back rent they owed, paper-clipped to it, was a folded note written in my mother's handwriting. "We hope we can put this behind us and be a family again. Love, Mom." I stared at it for a long time. Not because it moved me, but because of how much it didn't. There was no apology, no ownership. Just hope that I'd forget what it cost me to finally be left alone. I placed the check in my drawer. I didn't reply. That night, while unpacking the last box, I found my old external drive. I plugged it in out of habit, scanning the folder labels, college papers, photos, invoices, and then Grandpa Joe. I clicked play. "Hey, kiddo, if you're hearing this, I guess I'm not around anymore. But I want you to remember something. You're going to be okay, even if they never say they're sorry. Some people only value you when they can use you. And when you stop letting them, they call it betrayal. Let them. You just keep being you." I sat there for a while, letting his voice fill the room. No more shouting. No more silence to weaponize. Just his steady warmth echoing through a borrowed speaker in a place that belonged only to me. I pressed save, backed up the file, and placed the drive in the drawer next to the check. Ava learns that her worth doesn't depend on her family's validation. Through their betrayal, evicting her and exposing her struggles publicly, she discovers the power of self-reliance and silence. Her grandfather's letter and trust empower her to reclaim her rights, revealing her family's financial deceit. By standing firm, pursuing legal action, and refusing to engage emotionally, Ava realizes that true strength lies in defining her own value, not explaining it to those who refuse to see it. She finds freedom in her independence, choosing a life unburdened by their expectations, guided by her grandfather's enduring wisdom.
The morning sun streamed through the stained glass windows of St. Matthew's Cathedral, casting rainbow patterns across the white roses that adorned every pew. It should have been the happiest day of my life. I was marrying Marcus, the love of my life, surrounded by 300 guests in one of the most beautiful churches in the city. My dress, a custom varawang that had taken 8 months to create, fit perfectly and I felt like a princess from a fairy tale. But as I walked down the aisle, arm in arm with my father, I could feel the tension radiating from my family like heat from a furnace. My mother sat rigid in the front pew, her face a mask of barely controlled disapproval. My sister Jennifer refused to make eye contact, staring instead at her hands folded primly in her lap. My brother Thomas looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. They'd made their feelings about this wedding crystal clear over the past year. Not about Marcus, they actually liked Marcus quite a bit. He was everything they thought I should want in a husband. Successful, well-connected, from a good family. The problem was me. In their eyes, I didn't deserve him. "You're making a mistake, Catherine," my mother had said just that morning as I was getting ready. "That poor man has no idea what he's getting himself into." "Marcus loves me, Mom," I'd replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just as I am." "Love fades," she'd snapped back. "When he realizes what you really are, what you've been hiding from him, he'll leave you just like everyone else." What I'd been hiding. If only she knew the truth about what I'd actually been concealing from them for the past 3 years. Now, as Pastor Williams began the ceremony with the traditional words about love and commitment, I tried to push those thoughts away and focus on Marcus. He looked incredibly handsome in his black tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly styled, his brown eyes warm with love as he gazed at me. We'd written our own vows, and I could see him mentally rehearsing the words he'd prepared to share with me. "Dearly beloved," Pastor Williams intoned, his voice carrying clearly through the cathedral's excellent acoustics, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Catherine Elizabeth Morrison and Marcus Daniel Richardson in holy matrimony. Marriage is a sacred bond, entered into with joy and celebrated with family and friends." I squeezed Marcus's hands, drawing strength from his steady presence. We'd been together for 4 years, engaged for 1, and despite my family's constant negativity, I'd never been more certain of anything in my life. Marcus saw me, really saw me, in a way that no one else ever had. "If anyone here has just cause why these two should not be joined in marriage," Pastor Williams continued, "let them speak now or forever hold their peace." It was supposed to be a formality, a tradition that dated back centuries but rarely resulted in actual objections. In the movies, this was when former lovers burst through the doors or family secrets were revealed. In real life, people usually just sat in respectful silence. But not today. My mother rose slowly from her seat in the front pew, her black dress, she'd chosen to wear black to my wedding, rustling in the sudden silence. My father stood beside her, his face grim with determination. "We object," my mother announced, her voice carrying clearly through the cathedral. 300 guests turned to stare, their shocked murmurs creating a buzz of whispered conversations. Pastor Williams looked stunned. In 30 years of performing wedding ceremonies, he'd clearly never had anyone actually take him up on that particular invitation. "On what grounds?" he asked, his voice uncertain. My mother lifted her chin defiantly. "She doesn't deserve happiness. Our daughter has spent her entire life lying, manipulating, and taking advantage of people's kindness. She's deceived this poor man about who she really is, and we cannot stand by and watch her ruin his life the way she's ruined everything else she's touched." The silence in the cathedral was deafening. I could hear the sound of my own heartbeat, could feel the stares of hundreds of people boring into me. Some of Marcus's family members looked confused and uncomfortable. My own extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, looked embarrassed but not entirely surprised. Marcus's hand tightened around mine, and I could feel his steady strength flowing into me. He turned to look at my parents, his expression calm but firm. "With all due respect, Mr. and Mrs. Morrison," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the hushed cathedral, "I know exactly who Catherine is. I've known her for 4 years and I love every part of her." "You don't know what she's capable of," my father said, shaking his head sadly. "The lies she's told, the people she's hurt. We've tried to protect you from the truth, but we can't let this charade continue." I felt something break inside me, not my heart but something else. The last vestige of hope that my family might someday accept me, might someday see me as worthy of their love and respect. I turned to Pastor Williams and smiled, my voice surprisingly steady. "Please continue with the ceremony." "Catherine," my mother called out, desperation creeping into her voice. "Don't do this. Don't trap this good man in your web of lies." I finally turned to face my parents, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt completely at peace with who I was and what I'd accomplished. The only thing I've been hiding, I said clearly, my voice carrying to every corner of the cathedral, is how successful I've become despite everything you've done to undermine me. My mother's face flushed red. Success? You work in some little nonprofit. You can barely pay your rent. Actually, Marcus said, stepping slightly forward, Catherine is the founder and CEO of Harmony Solutions, the humanitarian technology company that was just featured on the cover of Forbes as one of the fastest-growing social enterprises in the country. The murmur that rippled through the congregation was audible this time. I saw several guests pulling out their phones, probably to verify what Marcus had just said. She's also, Marcus continued with obvious pride, been named to the UN's Advisory Council on Technology for Global Development, and her company's water purification systems have provided clean drinking water to over 2 million people in developing countries. My mother's mouth fell open. That's impossible. You're making that up. The Forbes article came out last week, I said quietly. You can look it up. The UN appointment was announced 3 months ago. And yesterday we signed a contract with the World Health Organization that will expand our water systems to 10 more countries. You're lying, my sister Jennifer said from her seat, but her voice lacked conviction. Marcus pulled out his phone and held it up. Forbes website. Right here. Catherine Morrison, the 32-year-old CEO revolutionizing humanitarian technology. The cathedral erupted in whispered conversations as guests began pulling out their own phones to verify the information. I could see the shock and confusion on my family's faces as they realized that everything they thought they knew about my life was wrong. Why didn't you tell us? My father asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Because every time I tried to share anything positive about my work, you dismissed it, I replied. Every achievement was minimized. Every success was attributed to luck or someone else's help. You made it very clear that you didn't think I was capable of anything significant. Pastor Williams cleared his throat diplomatically. Perhaps we could continue with the ceremony and address family matters afterward? Yes, I said firmly. Let's continue. My parents slowly sat back down, looking shell-shocked. The rest of the ceremony proceeded beautifully, though I could feel the undercurrent of whispered conversations and shocked murmurs throughout the cathedral. When Marcus and I exchanged vows, his words brought tears to my eyes. Catherine, you are the strongest, most compassionate, most brilliant woman I've ever known. You've built something beautiful in this world, and I'm honored to be part of your life. I promise to support your dreams, celebrate your successes, and love you exactly as you are. My own vows felt especially meaningful given the events of the past few minutes. Marcus, you saw my worth when my own family couldn't. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. I promise to build a life with you based on honesty, respect, and unconditional love. When Pastor Williams pronounced us husband and wife, the cathedral erupted in genuine applause and cheers. Marcus kissed me with such tenderness that I forgot all about my family's dramatic objection and lost myself in the joy of the moment. The reception was held at the Grand Ballroom of the Riverside Hotel, one of the most prestigious venues in the city. Marcus and I had spared no expense. After all, between his successful law practice and my company's recent success, we could afford to celebrate in style. As guests began arriving at the cocktail hour, I noticed something interesting happening. People were clustering around their phones, clearly researching the information that had come out during the ceremony. The Forbes article was being shared and discussed, and I could see the shift in how people were looking at me. My Aunt Patricia, who had always treated me with polite but distant courtesy, approached me during the cocktail hour. Catherine, dear, she said, her voice warm in a way I'd never heard before. I had no idea about your company. I just read the Forbes article and I'm absolutely amazed. 2 million people with clean water? That's incredible. Thank you, Aunt Patricia. It's been challenging work but incredibly rewarding. The article mentions that you started the company with no outside funding. How did you manage that? I smiled, remembering those early days when I'd worked 18-hour days and lived on ramen noodles to keep the company afloat. I had a small inheritance from Grandpa Morrison, about $50,000. I used that as seed money and reinvested every penny of profit back into the company for the first 3 years. Marcus's family had been incredibly warm to me from the beginning, but now they seemed to be looking at me with new respect and admiration. His mother, Diana Richardson, pulled me aside before dinner. "Catherine, I want you to know how proud we are to welcome you into our family," she said, tears in her eyes. "What you've accomplished is extraordinary, but more than that, the way you've handled your parents' behavior today shows incredible grace and maturity." "Thank you, Diana. That means more to me than you know. I hope you don't mind me asking, but why didn't your parents know about your success? It seems like such a wonderful thing to share with family." I hesitated, not wanting to speak badly of my parents, but also wanting to be honest. They've never really believed in my capabilities. Every time I tried to share professional good news, it was dismissed or minimized. Eventually I stopped trying. Diana shook her head sadly. "Their loss is our gain. You're going to fit right in with the Richardson family." Dinner was a lavish affair. We'd hired one of the city's top catering companies, and the menu featured dishes from around the world, reflecting the international focus of my work. The centerpieces were made from flowers that had been grown by cooperative farms that Harmony Solutions had helped establish in Central America. During the toasts, Marcus stood up to address our guests. "I want to thank everyone for being here to celebrate with Catherine and me," he began. "Today's ceremony had some unexpected moments, but they only reinforced something I already knew. I'm married to the most remarkable woman in the world." He turned to look at me, his love evident in his expression. "Catherine has dedicated her life to solving problems that most people wouldn't even attempt to tackle. She's brought clean water to villages that had never had it. She's created jobs in communities that desperately needed economic opportunity. She's proven that business can be a force for good in the world." The applause was thunderous, and I felt overwhelmed by the support and love from our guests. My maid of honor, Jessica, my college roommate and closest friend, gave a toast that brought down the house. "I've watched Catherine work 16-hour days, sleep on her office floor and turn down lucrative job offers because she believed in her mission. She's the most determined person I know, and she's never let setbacks or criticism stop her from pursuing her goals." Jessica glanced pointedly toward my family's table. "Some people measure success by how much money you make or how impressive your title sounds. Catherine measures success by how many lives she can improve. That's the difference between being successful and being significant." As the evening progressed, I noticed my family sitting largely alone at their assigned table. Other guests seemed to be avoiding them, and I could see my mother looking increasingly uncomfortable and isolated. The real turning point came during the cake cutting. As Marcus and I posed for photos with our 3-tiered cake, decorated with sugar flowers that represented the different countries where Harmony Solutions operated, my phone buzzed with an urgent message. I glanced at it and couldn't help but smile. "What is it?" Marcus asked. "The BBC wants to interview me next week about the WHO contract," I said. "Apparently, our water purification system is going to be featured in a documentary about innovative solutions to global poverty." Marcus beamed with pride. "Mrs. Richardson, you continue to amaze me." "Mrs. Richardson," I repeated, loving the sound of it. "I like that." My cousin David, who worked in international development, had been standing nearby and overheard our conversation. "Catherine, I have to ask, is it true that your systems can provide clean water for an entire village for less than the cost of a single well?" "That's right," I confirmed. "Traditional well drilling can cost anywhere from $15,000 to $50,000, depending on the location and depth required. Our solar-powered purification systems can serve the same population for about $8,000, and they don't require ongoing maintenance or fuel costs." David shook his head in amazement. "That's revolutionary. No wonder the UN wanted you on their advisory council." As the dancing began, I noticed my parents finally approaching Marcus and me. My mother looked pale and shaken, my father appeared deeply uncomfortable, and my sister Jennifer was crying quietly. "Catherine," my mother said, her voice trembling, "we need to talk." "I think you've said enough for one day," Marcus replied firmly, stepping slightly in front of me. "Please," my father said. "We owe you both an apology." I studied their faces, seeing genuine remorse there for the first time in years. "All right. We can talk." We moved to a quiet corner of the ballroom, away from the dancing and celebration. "We had no idea," my mother began, tears streaming down her face. "We thought you were struggling, that your company was just some small charity that barely stayed afloat." "Why would you think that?" I asked. "I tried to tell you about our successes many times." "We know," my father said heavily. We realize now that we weren't listening. We made assumptions based on prejudices we'd held since you were young. Jennifer finally spoke up, her voice thick with emotion. You were always so different from us. You cared about things we didn't understand, wanted to help people we'd never met. We thought you were naive, unrealistic. Helping people isn't naive, Marcus said quietly. It's the most realistic thing anyone can do. Catherine has built a sustainable business model around solving real problems. We know that now, my mother said. We've spent the past hour reading everything we could find about your company. The Forbes article, the UN announcement, the testimonials from villages you've helped. Catherine, what you've accomplished is extraordinary. I felt a complex mix of emotions: relief, sadness, anger, hope. It would have meant everything to me if you'd shown this kind of interest and support 3 years ago. Or even 3 months ago. We know, my father said. We failed you as parents. We let our own narrow view of success blind us to what you were actually achieving. The question is, I said carefully, what happens now? This isn't something that gets fixed with one conversation. My sister stepped forward. I want to learn about your company. I want to understand what you do, maybe even help if you'd let me. I looked at Jennifer with surprise. She'd always been the most dismissive of my career choices, the quickest to make cutting remarks about my do-gooder attitude. What kind of help? I asked. I work in marketing, she said. I know it's not the same as what you do, but maybe there are ways to get your story out to more people, to attract more donors or partners. Marcus and I exchanged glances. Harmony Solutions had grown rapidly, but we'd always struggled with marketing and public relations. Not because we lacked success stories, but because we were so focused on the work itself that we often forgot to share our achievements. We could use help with that, I admitted. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with my family asking genuine questions about my work and expressing what seemed like sincere interest in being part of my life going forward. By the end, my mother was crying openly. I'm so proud of you, she said. And I'm so ashamed of how we've treated you. We don't deserve your forgiveness, but we're hoping you might give us a chance to do better. I looked at Marcus, who squeezed my hand supportively. What do you think? I asked him. I think families are complicated, he said diplomatically. But I also think people can change if they really want to. I turned back to my parents and siblings. I'm willing to try. But things have to be different. I need to see real effort, real change in how you treat me and respect my choices. You will, my father promised. We'll do whatever it takes. The rest of the reception was transformed. My family spent the remainder of the evening actually talking to Marcus and me, asking thoughtful questions about our plans, our work, our future together. Other guests noticed the change and began including my parents and siblings in conversations again. When the evening finally ended and Marcus and I were alone in our honeymoon suite, I felt emotionally drained but cautiously optimistic. How are you feeling about everything? Marcus asked as we sat on the couch, finally able to relax. Confused, I admitted. For years I've dreamed of my family recognizing my achievements and being proud of me. Now that it's happened, I don't know how to feel about it. It's okay to be conflicted, Marcus said, pulling me close. They hurt you for a long time. It's going to take time to rebuild that trust. Do you think they really mean it? The apologies, the promises to do better. Marcus considered the question carefully. I think the shock of learning the truth about your success was genuine. Whether they can sustain the change, that remains to be seen. But Catherine, you don't have to forgive them immediately, and you don't have to trust them completely right away. I know. I spent so many years wanting their approval that I'm not sure how to handle actually having it. You don't need their approval anymore, Marcus reminded me gently. You've built something amazing without it. Their recognition is nice, but it doesn't validate what you've accomplished. Your work validates itself. 3 weeks later, as Marcus and I returned from our honeymoon in Costa Rica, where we'd visited 3 villages that used Harmony Solutions water systems, I found an unexpected package waiting for us. It was from my sister Jennifer, and it contained a comprehensive marketing proposal for Harmony Solutions. She'd clearly spent considerable time researching our work, our impact, and our potential for growth. The proposal was professional, thoughtful, and showed a deep understanding of our mission. Attached was a handwritten note. Catherine, I know I have a lot to make up for. I'd like to start by helping you share your incredible story with the world. If you're willing to give me a chance, I promise to work harder than I've ever worked at anything. I want to be part of something that matters. Love, Jennifer. Marcus read the proposal over my shoulder. This is actually really good, he said with surprise. She's identified some opportunities one hadn't even considered. I smiled, feeling something that had been broken inside me beginning to heal. Maybe people really can change. Maybe they can, Marcus agreed. The question is, are you ready to find out? I looked at the proposal again, seeing not just a business opportunity but a potential bridge back to my family. I think I am. 6 months later, Harmony Solutions had expanded into 5 new countries, largely due to the marketing and outreach strategies Jennifer had developed. My parents had become some of our most dedicated volunteers, using their business connections to introduce us to potential donors and partners. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, still reminders of the years of dismissal and criticism. But we were building something new together, something based on mutual respect and shared purpose. And every time I looked at my wedding ring, I remembered that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings can come from the most challenging moments. My parents' objection at my wedding had forced a truth into the open that needed to be spoken. In trying to prevent my happiness, they'd actually cleared the way for a deeper, more authentic relationship than we'd ever had before. Marcus had been right. I didn't need their approval to validate my success. But having their genuine support made the work even more meaningful. And that, I thought, was worth the painful journey it had taken to get there. The email came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing tactical communications systems at Forward Operating Base Lightning in Afghanistan. The subject line read, "Car situation, don't worry about it." My stomach dropped even before I opened it. "Elena, I hope you're staying safe over there. I wanted to let you know that I sold your Honda last week. Before you get upset, hear me out. You don't need it overseas, and honestly it was just sitting in the driveway collecting dust and taking up space. The battery died twice and your father had to keep jumping it. The timing worked out perfectly because Sophia's wedding costs have gotten completely out of hand. The venue wants another $8,000 upfront, and the catering company increased their prices. I used the car money to cover the difference." Sophia was so relieved. You know how stressed she's been about the wedding planning. Dad agrees this was the sensible thing to do. We can help you find something used when you get back next year. Maybe something more practical this time. Love, Mom. Sophia says thank you. She knows you would have wanted to help with the wedding if you could. I read the email 3 times, sitting in my cramped quarters at 3 a.m. Afghan time, before the full reality sank in. Mom had sold my car, the 2019 Honda Civic I'd saved for 2 years to buy, the first new car I'd ever owned, to pay for my sister's wedding. Without asking. Without even telling me until after the fact. The most infuriating part was the casual assumption that I'd be fine with it, that my property was somehow available for family use whenever they decided it was convenient. The idea that I wouldn't have minded helping with wedding costs when no one had even asked if I wanted to contribute. I was a communications specialist with the Army, deployed for my second tour in Afghanistan. What my family didn't understand, what I'd deliberately kept vague in my letters and calls home, was that my role involved much more than maintaining radio equipment. I'd been recruited into a specialized program 3 years earlier, working with advanced satellite communications and encrypted data systems. The work had led to additional training in cybersecurity and digital intelligence. During my first deployment, I'd helped design communication protocols that were now being used throughout the theater. The skills I'd developed had attracted attention from private defense contractors, and 6 months ago, I'd quietly started a consulting business, Martinez Defense Solutions. Working within military regulations, I was providing cybersecurity assessments and communication system design to defense contractors during my off hours. It was challenging work that required security clearances my family didn't even know I possessed. It was also extremely well-compensated work. In the 6 months since starting MDS, I'd earned more than my parents made combined in a year. I'd been carefully saving and investing the money, planning for my transition out of the military and into a career that would leverage everything I'd learned. I'd kept my business income private for several reasons. Military regulations required discretion about outside employment. My family had a tendency to treat any success I achieved as a family resource rather than a personal accomplishment. And honestly, I'd learned that sharing financial information with my parents usually led to requests for loans or help that never got repaid. Case in point, my car was now helping to fund Sophia's elaborate wedding while I was serving overseas. I drafted about 15 different responses to Mom's email, ranging from hurt to furious to coldly professional. Finally, I deleted them all and wrote back. Thanks for letting me know about the car. I understand your reasoning. Lena. Short, neutral, giving nothing away. Let them think I was fine with their decision. The truth was I wasn't fine with it. But I also wasn't surprised. This was the pattern that had defined my relationship with my family for years. Sophia was the golden child who could do no wrong, whose needs and wants took priority over everything else. I was the responsible one who was expected to understand and accommodate whatever decisions the family made. When Sophia had dropped out of college twice, burning through $40,000 in tuition, Dad had shrugged it off as finding herself. When I'd enlisted to pay for my own education, they'd been disappointed that I wasn't pursuing something more feminine and traditional. When Sophia had moved back home at 26 with $15,000 in credit card debt, Mom had paid it off and called it helping family. When I'd asked to borrow $500 for car insurance during my first year of service, Dad had lectured me about financial responsibility. So selling my car to fund Sophia's wedding was just the latest example of priorities I'd never be able to change. But what they didn't know was that I'd been planning a surprise for my homecoming anyway. My contract with MDS had been so successful that I'd been invited to submit a proposal for a major Department of Defense cybersecurity initiative. If accepted, it would be worth $2.8 million over 3 years. I'd found out 2 weeks ago that my proposal had been accepted. I was coming home to more money than my family could have imagined, and I'd been planning to surprise them with some generous gifts. A vacation for my parents, help with Sophia's wedding costs, maybe even a down payment on a house for myself. Now I was reconsidering those plans. Over the next few months, I threw myself into my work with even more intensity. The DoD contract was challenging and rewarding, requiring me to develop security protocols for next-generation military communication systems. I was working with some of the brightest minds in defense technology, and the intellectual stimulation was incredible. I also started planning my transition back to civilian life. With the MDS income, I could afford to be selective about my next steps. I'd been accepted to Stanford's graduate program in cybersecurity, with classes starting 6 months after my deployment ended. I'd also received offers from 3 major tech companies and 2 defense contractors. My financial advisor helped me purchase a house in Palo Alto, near Stanford's campus. It was a beautiful 4-bedroom place with a view of the mountains, and I planned to live there during graduate school and potentially beyond. I also made another purchase, one that would serve a specific purpose when I returned home. Throughout my deployment, Mom's emails continued with updates about wedding planning. The costs kept climbing: flowers, photography, catering, music, decorations. Each email contained subtle hints about additional financial pressures, usually followed by expressions of gratitude that they'd had Elena's car money to help cover unexpected expenses. Sophia's emails were worse. She wrote about how grateful she was that I'd contributed to her wedding, as if selling my car had been a generous gift rather than something done without my knowledge or consent. Elena, I know you wanted to help with the wedding costs, and using your car money was such a thoughtful way to contribute even while you're overseas. I'm going to make sure you get the best seat at the reception. You're such an amazing sister. I showed that email to my bunkmate Sergeant Rodriguez, who just shook her head. That's some premium-grade family dysfunction right there, she said. They sold your car and convinced themselves you should be grateful for the opportunity to contribute? Pretty much. What are you going to do when you get back? I smiled. I'm going to give them the opportunity to practice what they preach about: family generosity. My deployment ended on a Thursday in March. I'd arranged for a week of leave before reporting to my next assignment, which would be transitioning out of active duty and beginning terminal leave. I didn't tell my family exactly when I was flying back. Mom had offered to pick me up at the airport, but I told her I needed to handle some military paperwork first and would make my own way home. The truth was, I wanted to see their faces when I arrived. I landed at Denver International Airport on Thursday evening and took a taxi to the car dealership where my surprise was waiting. 6 months earlier, I'd arranged to purchase a 2023 BMW M4 Competition, a $75,000 sports car that represented everything my family thought was beyond my reach. It was sleek, powerful, and completely impractical for someone they still thought of as a struggling soldier who needed help with car insurance. I'd had it delivered to a dealership near the airport specifically for this moment. The dealership manager, Mr. Thompson, greeted me personally. Ms. Martinez, welcome back from your deployment. Your M4 is ready for pickup. He led me to the showroom where the car was displayed under spotlights. Alpine white with black interior, carbon fiber accents, and every performance option BMW offered. It was absolutely gorgeous. All the paperwork is complete, he said, handing me the keys. Insurance is active, registration is current. You're ready to drive off the lot. I signed the final documents and slid behind the wheel. The engine started with a satisfying growl that announced its presence to anyone within 100 yards. 20 minutes later, I pulled into my parents' driveway. Mom must have heard the engine because she appeared at the front door immediately, followed by Dad and Sophia. They all stood on the porch, staring at the BMW like they were hallucinating. I turned off the engine and got out slowly, giving them time to process what they were seeing. Elena. Mom called out, but her voice was uncertain. You're home. I walked up to the porch where they were still standing frozen. Surprise, I said simply. That car. Dad said slowly. Is that yours? Yes. But, how? Sophia asked. I mean, where did you get the money for something like that? I bought it. Mom found her voice. Elena, sweetheart, please tell me you didn't do something financially irresponsible. Those cars cost. I mean, the payments alone. I paid cash, I said calmly. All three of them stared at me. Cash. Dad repeated. Yes. No payments, no financing. I bought it outright. Mom looked confused and concerned. Elena, where did you get that kind of money? Did you take out some kind of military loan? No loans, Mom. I earned it. How? Sophia asked, and for the first time, her voice carried a note of something that might have been respect. The same way you earn money for your wedding. I worked for it. I walked past them into the house, leaving them on the porch to stare at the BMW. Inside, everything looked exactly the same as when I'd left for deployment. Family photos on the mantle, Mom's knitting basket by her chair, Dad's collection of golf magazines on the coffee table. The only difference was the absence of my car keys from the hook by the garage door. They followed me inside, clearly struggling to process what had just happened. Elena, Mom said carefully, we need to talk about this car situation. What about it? Well, it's very expensive. And after we had to sell your Honda. You didn't have to sell my Honda, Mom. You chose to sell my Honda. But the wedding costs were Sophia's responsibility to manage. Sophia stepped forward. Elena, I'm grateful for your contribution to the wedding. The car money really helped. Stop, I said quietly. Let's be clear about what happened. You didn't ask for my contribution. You took my property and used it for your purposes. Those are very different things. Dad tried to mediate. Elena, we understand you might be upset about the car, but family is about helping each other. You're right, Dad. Family is about helping each other. So I'm curious, when exactly were you planning to help me replace the car you sold? Well, we thought, when you got back we could help you find something used. Something used. Something cheaper. Something more appropriate for someone you think can't afford anything better. Mom looked hurt. That's not what we meant. Isn't it? You sold my car because you assumed I couldn't afford to object. You used the money for Sophia's wedding because you assumed I'd be honored to contribute. You never asked what I wanted because you assumed you knew what I could afford. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water while they exchanged glances. Elena, Sophia said slowly, how much money do you actually have? Enough to buy a $75,000 car with cash and not worry about it. But your military salary covers my basic expenses. The BMW was purchased with income from my consulting business. Consulting business? Dad asked. Martinez Defense Solutions. I provide cybersecurity consulting to defense contractors. It's been quite successful. Mom sat down heavily. How successful? Successful enough that I've been accepted to Stanford's graduate program with full funding. Successful enough that I've purchased a house in Palo Alto. Successful enough that I have more in savings than most people see in several years. The room was completely quiet. Why didn't you tell us? Mom asked finally. Because every time I've shared good news with this family, it's been turned into an obligation. When I got promoted, Dad asked if I could help with the mortgage. When I got my security clearance, Mom asked if I could use my connections to help Sophia get a government job. When I mentioned my consulting work, you asked if I could get family discounts for your friends. I finished my water and set the glass in the sink. So I stopped sharing. I let you assume I was struggling financially because it was easier than dealing with constant requests for money and favors. But if we'd known. Sophia began. If you'd known what? That you didn't need to sell my car to pay for your wedding? That you could have asked me directly for help instead of taking my property? That you were treating someone with significant financial resources like a charity case. Dad looked uncomfortable. We made assumptions. You made assumptions based on what served your purposes. You wanted to use my car money for Sophia's wedding, so you convinced yourselves that I didn't need the car and would be happy to contribute. I moved toward the stairs to go to my old room. Where are you going? Mom asked. I'm staying at a hotel tonight, then driving to California tomorrow. California? But you just got back. I have a house there. And a graduate program starting soon. And a business to run. When will we see you again? Sophia asked, and for the first time she sounded genuinely concerned. I paused at the bottom of the stairs. I don't know. When you're ready to treat me like an adult whose property and decisions deserve respect instead of like a resource you can use whenever it's convenient. Elena, Dad said, we love you. We're proud of you. We didn't understand. You didn't understand because you didn't ask. You made assumptions and decisions based on those assumptions without ever considering that you might be wrong. I went upstairs and packed my few remaining belongings. When I came back down, they were all sitting in the living room, clearly having had some kind of family conference. Elena, Mom said, we owe you an apology. For what specifically? For selling your car without permission. For using the money without asking. For treating you like we knew what was best for you instead of respecting your autonomy. It was a better apology than I'd expected. And for assuming you needed our help instead of recognizing that you've been incredibly successful on your own, Sophia added. I'm sorry for taking credit for your contribution to my wedding when you never actually agreed to contribute. Dad nodded. We're sorry for treating you like the family member who needed managing instead of recognizing that you've become the most successful person in this room. I looked at each of them, seeing genuine remorse in their faces. Thank you for the apology. It means something. Is there a way to make this right? Mom asked. You can start by respecting my choices going forward. You can stop assuming you know what's best for me. And you can understand that my success doesn't make me a family ATM any more than my apparent lack of success made me a source of free resources. What about the car money? Sophia asked quietly. Keep it. Consider it a wedding gift. But understand that it's a gift I'm choosing to give retroactively, not something you were entitled to take. As I walked toward the door, Dad called after me. Elena, are you really not going to visit anymore? I turned back to look at my family, these people who had raised me and loved me and completely misunderstood me for years. I'll visit when you're ready to see me as I actually am instead of as who you think I should be. I walked out to the BMW, which gleamed in the driveway like a beautiful, expensive middle finger to every assumption they'd made about my life. As I drove away, I could see them standing at the window watching the taillights disappear into the night. My phone started ringing before I'd reached the end of the street. I let it go to voicemail. 6 months later, I was settled into my graduate program at Stanford and running MDS from my home office. The business had grown to 8 employees and $12 million in annual revenue. I'd also been approached by 3 venture capital firms interested in funding expansion into commercial cybersecurity. I got a call from Sophia. Elena, I wanted to let you know that I've started paying back the car money. What? I've been putting aside $500 a month since the wedding. I know you said to consider it a gift, but it didn't feel right keeping money that wasn't freely given. I was quiet for a moment, surprised by this development. Sophia, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I need to. Because you were right, taking your property and calling it a contribution was wrong, even if we convinced ourselves it was okay at the time. How are Mom and Dad handling this? They're learning. Dad's been asking a lot of questions about business and entrepreneurship. Mom's been reading articles about supporting adult children without being controlling. They're trying to understand how they got things so wrong. It was a start. And you? I'm learning too. I'm learning that being the favorite doesn't mean being entitled to other people's resources. I'm learning that family support should go both ways. And I'm learning that my little sister has become someone pretty amazing. 6 months after that, I drove the BMW back to Denver for Christmas. This time when I pulled into the driveway, no one seemed surprised by the car. Instead, Mom hugged me and said, "We're so proud of everything you've accomplished." And for the first time in years, I believed she meant it.